The galaxy had known relative peace for decades, ever since the Treaty of Arcturus ended the last great war between the Galactic Empire and the Federation of Free Worlds. The Empire, a sprawling and technologically superior force, had been content to leave the outlying human colonies in peace, so long as they paid their dues and supplied resources. But peace in the galaxy was as fragile as the dust clouds that drifted between the stars. On the distant colony world of Sarapus, life was quiet. The inhabitants were mostly human settlers, leading simple lives far from the political machinations of the galaxy's core worlds. Among them was a small enclave of 800,000 children, sent to Sarapus as part of a Federation-sponsored program designed to protect and educate the next generation away from the reach of the Empire. But one cold, unfeeling day, everything changed. Without warning, Imperial dreadnoughts descended upon Sarapus. The sky darkened as the massive warships blotted out the sun, and panic swept through the colony. Communication with the Empire was impossible. Their intent became clear as the first plasma bombs began to fall. The bombardment was relentless, precise, and utterly devastating. The ground quaked, and entire cities were obliterated in moments. In the chaos, desperate cries filled the airwaves. Parents called for their children only to be met with silence. The children, clustered in their schools and dormitories, had been targeted first. A single, harrowing message was broadcast to the Federation command. 800,000 souls sacrificed for the sins of their ancestors. Let this be your only warning. The massacre was over as quickly as it began. The Empire's ships vanished into hyperspace, leaving nothing but ashes and rubble in their wake. Sarapus was a wasteland, and the galaxy was plunged into a new era of fear and uncertainty. News of the massacre spread like wildfire. The Federation was paralyzed with shock and outrage. The death of 800,000 children was a crime of unspeakable horror, and the implications were terrifying. The Empire had made its move, and now the galaxy waited with bated breath for what would come next. In the ruins of Sarapus, a small group of survivors emerged from the rubble. Among them was Commander Lira, a veteran of the Federation's military, who had been overseeing the colony's defenses. Haunted by her failure to protect the children, Lira swore vengeance against the Empire. Lira gathered the survivors, determined to piece together what had happened. As they sifted through the wreckage, they discovered something the Empire had overlooked: a small data core hidden deep within one of the colony's underground bunkers. It contained detailed records of the Empire's communications in the days leading up to the massacre. The data revealed a chilling truth. The massacre was not a random act of violence. It was part of a calculated plan by the Empire to eradicate humanity's future, a move designed to break the Federation's will to resist. But the data also contained something else: coordinates to a secret Imperial research facility on a distant moon. The facility was rumored to be where the Empire's most horrific weapons were developed. Determined to strike back, Lira and her team set out to find the facility. They knew it was a long shot, but they had nothing left to lose. The journey was perilous, with the Empire's forces hunting them at every turn, but the desire for vengeance drove them forward. The journey to the secret Imperial research facility had been long and perilous, but nothing could have prepared Lira and her team for the sight that awaited them on the desolate moon of Korath 7. The facility loomed like a fortress of despair, its walls stretching high into the sky, constructed from an ominous black metal that seemed to absorb all light. The structure exuded a sense of dread, as if the very air around it was thick with the echoes of unspeakable horrors. Lira's team, now reduced to a handful of hardened survivors, approached the facility under the cover of darkness. The oppressive silence was broken only by the faint hum of energy shields and the distant howl of the moon's frigid winds. Every step closer to the facility heightened their sense of unease, but they pressed on, driven by the knowledge that within these walls lay the key to understanding, and possibly stopping, the Empire's monstrous plans. The entrance was heavily guarded, as expected, but Lira had come prepared. Using the codes they had retrieved from the data core on Sarapus, she hacked into the facility's security grid, creating a temporary window of opportunity. The team slipped inside, their breath visible in the cold, sterile air. The interior of the facility was a labyrinth of dimly lit corridors, each one more foreboding than the last. The walls were lined with strange, pulsing conduits that seemed to carry not just energy, but something more sinister. The facility's design was clearly non-human, the architecture a blend of alien and imperial technology, a fusion that hinted at the dark purpose behind its creation. As they ventured deeper, they came across the first signs of the Empire's atrocities. Cells, hundreds of them, lined the walls of a massive chamber. Inside each one, grotesque remnants of the children from Sarapus, twisted and deformed by cruel experiments. The sight was gut-wrenching. The once vibrant faces of innocents were now contorted in silent screams, their bodies warped by genetic manipulation, their minds shattered. "They used them as lab rats," whispered Jax, the team's medic, his voice barely concealing the fury and grief that threatened to overwhelm him. "These were children." Lira clenched her fists, her knuckles white. "We'll make them pay," she vowed, her voice a low growl. But even as she spoke, she knew that vengeance alone would not undo the horror that had been wrought here. Pushing forward, they reached a central control room, its vast array of monitors displaying streams of data in a language that only partially resembled anything they had seen before. It was here that they discovered the full extent of the Empire's plans. The facility wasn't just a research station. It was a production site for a bioweapon of unimaginable power. The weapon was designed to target the human genome specifically, eradicating humanity at a genetic level while leaving other species unharmed. The horror of it sank in as Lira realized the implications. The Empire intended to wipe out humanity completely, starting with the children. They had been testing this weapon on the young, refining it, perfecting it until it was ready for mass deployment. But there was more. The data revealed that the weapon was derived from a captured alien entity, one of the last of its kind, imprisoned deep within the facility. The entity was the source of the weapon's power, a being of pure energy and consciousness that had been tortured and manipulated by the Empire for years. Its pain and rage resonated through the very fabric of the facility, a silent scream that only those who truly listened could hear. Lira knew what she had to do. "We have to find it," she said, her voice resolute. "We have to set it free." The path to the entity's chamber was fraught with danger. The team had to fight their way through Imperial guards, evade deadly security drones, and navigate treacherous traps designed to keep intruders out. But nothing could stop them now. They were fueled by a righteous fury, a burning desire to strike back against the Empire that had caused so much suffering. Finally, they reached the heart of the facility, a massive, spherical chamber bathed in an eerie blue light. At its center, suspended in a field of energy, was the alien entity. It was a being of ethereal beauty, its form constantly shifting and pulsing with an inner light that seemed to dim and brighten with the rhythm of its suffering. It had no physical shape, no body that could be easily defined. But its presence was overwhelming, a living, breathing manifestation of pure energy and emotion. Lira approached the control panel, her hands trembling as she began the process of disabling the containment field. The entity's thoughts brushed against her mind, a torrent of emotions that she could barely comprehend. Pain, anger, fear, and above all, a desperate yearning for freedom. "Please," she whispered, not knowing if it could understand her. "We need your help. We can stop this, but we need you." The entity's response was not in words, but in feelings, a wave of sorrow and gratitude that brought Lira to her knees. She felt its anguish, its years of torment at the hands of the Empire, and she understood the depth of its suffering. But she also felt its resolve, its determination to end the nightmare it had been forced to create. With a final command, Lira deactivated the containment field. The energy holding the entity in place dissipated, and for a moment, the chamber was filled with a blinding light. The entity was free, but the freedom came at a cost. The release of energy triggered a catastrophic failure in the facility's systems. Alarms blared, and the walls began to shake as the entire structure started to collapse. "Go!" Lira shouted to her team, who were already moving toward the exit. But the entity remained, its light growing brighter, more intense, as it gathered its strength. Lira hesitated, torn between staying and helping it or escaping with her team. But the entity's thoughts reached out to her one last time, a gentle push, urging her to leave. It had made its choice. With a heavy heart, Lira turned and ran, the walls crumbling around her as she raced to catch up with her team. The ground shook violently, and the sound of explosions echoed through the corridors as the facility tore itself apart. Behind them, the entity unleashed its full power, a blinding surge of energy that consumed the entire moon in a brilliant flash. The team barely made it to their ship before the shockwave hit. As they sped away from the collapsing moon, Lira looked back at the devastation. The moon was gone, reduced to a cloud of debris and dust. The Empire's dark experiment had been destroyed, but at what cost? As they entered hyperspace, Lira felt a strange sense of calm. The entity had sacrificed itself to stop the weapon, but it had also given them something more, a warning, a message that she could feel deep within her mind. The Empire was still out there, and its plans were far from over. But now they had a chance, however slim, to fight back, and fight they would. Lira turned to her team, their faces reflecting the same resolve she felt in her heart. "This isn't over," she said, her voice steady. "We're going to warn the galaxy. We're going to stop them." And as the stars streaked past their ship, Lira knew that the fight was just beginning. The Empire had made its move, but so had they. And this time they wouldn't be running. They would be fighting for survival, for justice, and for the memory of the 800,000 souls lost in the cold vacuum of space. The destruction of Korath 7 sent shockwaves across the galaxy, both literally and figuratively. The moon's obliteration had been visible from light years away, a brilliant supernova of energy that marked the end of the Empire's dark experiment. But as Lira Donovan and her team emerged from hyperspace, the reality of their situation began to set in. They had struck a blow against the Empire, but they were still only a handful of survivors, fugitives with a desperate mission. Their ship, the Revenant, was a small, battered vessel, barely holding together after their harrowing escape. The crew was exhausted, mentally and physically, but there was no time to rest. The data they had retrieved, combined with the alien entity's final warning, pointed to a grim future. The Empire was preparing to launch an all-out war against humanity, and they had to warn the Federation before it was too late. Lira stood on the bridge, staring out at the swirling vortex of hyperspace. Her mind was racing, trying to piece together their next move. The Empire's war machine was vast and unstoppable, and their only hope was to spread the warning before the Imperial fleets began their assault. But even as she formulated a plan, doubts gnawed at her. Would the Federation believe them? Would they act in time? Or was it already too late? As they dropped out of hyperspace near the edge of Federation space, the gravity of their mission weighed heavily on the crew. Lira turned to her communications officer, a young woman named Anara, who had been one of the few who managed to keep her composure throughout the ordeal. "Anara, send a priority message to all Federation outposts," Lira ordered. "Use the emergency code. They need to know what's coming." Anara nodded, her fingers flying over the console as she began to transmit the message. The content was simple but devastating. The Empire has begun their final solution. They are targeting human colonies. The massacre of 800,000 children on Sarapus was just the beginning. Flee now or prepare to fight. The Empire's fleets are on the move. We are all in danger. Lira watched as the message was sent, her heart heavy. She knew the Federation's response would be critical. If they acted quickly, they might be able to evacuate some of the outer colonies, perhaps even rally a defense. But if they hesitated, countless more lives would be lost. As the transmission went out, the Revenant sensors picked up an incoming message. It was from the Federation's high command, and the tone was as cold as the void outside. "Commander Donovan," the voice crackled through the speakers, "this is Admiral Tarkin of the Federation High Council. We have received your transmission. Your actions on Korath 7 have been noted, but you are to return to base immediately for debriefing. The Federation does not act on unverified reports, especially those that could incite widespread panic." Lira's blood ran cold. "Admiral, with all due respect, this is not a drill. The Empire is moving to exterminate humanity. We don't have time for bureaucratic procedures. We need to start evacuating the colonies now." The Admiral's voice was calm, almost condescending. "Commander, you have disobeyed direct orders by engaging the enemy without authorization. Your data is being analyzed. But until we have confirmation, the Federation will not commit to any large-scale operations. You are ordered to stand down and await further instructions." Lira's fists clenched. "Admiral, if we wait, it'll be too late. We have proof." "Enough, Commander," the Admiral interrupted. "You are out of line. Return to base, or you will be considered a rogue operative and dealt with accordingly." The communication cut off, leaving Lira seething with frustration. She knew the Federation's reluctance to act stemmed from fear of provoking the Empire, but their inaction could lead to humanity's extinction. The crew waited in tense silence, looking to Lira for guidance. The weight of leadership bore down on her like never before. She had to make a choice: follow the Federation's orders and risk dooming millions, or go rogue and try to warn the galaxy on her own. Lira turned to her crew, her expression steely with resolve. "We can't wait for the Federation to decide. The Empire is already on the move and every second counts. If we stay, we'll be caught in their net. If we go, we might have a chance to save lives." Jax, the medic, stepped forward. "Whatever you decide, Commander, we're with you. We've come this far. There's no turning back now." Anara nodded in agreement. "We've already defied orders to do what's right. Let's finish what we started." Lira's heart swelled with pride. These people had been through hell and back, and yet they were willing to risk everything to fight for what was right. She knew what had to be done. "We're going to spread the warning ourselves," Lira declared. "We'll hit every major colony, every outpost, and tell them what's coming. We'll make sure the Empire's reign of terror doesn't go unchallenged." With renewed determination, the Revenant set a course for the first human colony in their path. As they traveled, they broadcast the warning to anyone who would listen, urging them to flee, to hide, or to prepare for battle. Some heeded the call, taking their families and fleeing to the farthest reaches of space. Others rallied to the cause, ready to make a stand against the Empire's tyranny. But the Empire was already one step ahead. As the Revenant arrived at the first colony, they found it under siege. Imperial warships filled the skies, raining destruction down upon the helpless inhabitants. Lira's heart sank as she watched the carnage unfold on the viewscreen. The Empire's brutality was beyond anything she had imagined. They couldn't save this colony, but they could still warn the others. With a heavy heart, Lira gave the order to continue their mission, even as they watched the colony fall. The Revenant became a ghost ship, slipping through the cracks of Imperial blockades, delivering its grim message to every corner of the galaxy. As they traveled, they gathered a growing number of ships and people willing to fight. A ragtag fleet formed around the Revenant, made up of civilian vessels, old Federation warships, and anything that could fly. They became a symbol of resistance, a beacon of hope in the darkness. But the Empire was relentless. Each day brought new reports of massacres, of colonies burned to the ground, of entire populations wiped out in the blink of an eye. The galaxy was burning, and the Federation's inaction only fueled the flames. In one final, desperate move, Lira decided to take the fight directly to the Empire. Using the data they had retrieved from Korath 7, they identified a critical Imperial communications hub, a facility that coordinated the movements of the Empire's fleets. If they could disable it, they might buy the Federation the time it needed to organize a defense. The mission was a suicide run, and everyone knew it. But the crew of the Revenant was undeterred. They had come too far to turn back now. As they approached the hub, the Imperial defenses opened fire. The Revenant weaved through the onslaught, taking heavy damage but pressing forward. Lira led the charge, her eyes fixed on the target. They had one shot to make this count. With a final burst of speed, the Revenant broke through the defenses and slammed into the communications hub, unleashing a devastating barrage of explosives. The facility erupted in a massive explosion, sending shockwaves through space. The Revenant was caught in the blast, its hull buckling and tearing apart. Lira was thrown from her seat as the ship disintegrated around her. But in her final moments, she knew they had succeeded. The Empire's communications were crippled, and the galaxy had been given a fighting chance. As the darkness closed in, Lira's last thoughts were of the children of Sarapus, and of the future they had fought so hard to protect. She knew that her warning would echo across the stars, a rallying cry for all who dared to defy the Empire. and with that she closed her eyes, knowing that her sacrifice had not been in vain. In the days that followed, the galaxy was ablaze with resistance. The Federation, finally spurred into action by the chaos caused by the Revenant's final mission, began to rally its forces. Colonies that had once been isolated and vulnerable now stood united against the Empire's tyranny. The battle for humanity's survival had truly begun, and though the odds were stacked against them, there was hope. Hope born from the courage of those who had dared to defy the Empire, and from the warning that had spread across the stars. Lira Donovan's name became a legend, a symbol of resistance and sacrifice, and though she was gone, her legacy lived on in the hearts of those who continued the fight. The galaxy had been given a chance, and they would not waste it. The final war for humanity's future was underway, and the outcome was far from certain. But as long as there were those willing to stand and fight, the Empire would never have complete victory. And the warning, "Flee now, or prepare to fight," would echo through the stars, a testament to the indomitable spirit of humanity.